Hello and welcome to the latest We Are Sunderland briefing, and this might be a bit more upbeat than we have been in the last few weeks on the back of that impressive Good Friday win at Cardiff. We're going to look back on that. Joe Ramage, who I'm joined by, was in Wales on Friday, and we'll look ahead to the game against Blackburn at the Stadium of Light on Monday. Just a bit of housekeeping before we start. If you haven't subscribed already to the YouTube channel, then please do press that button and take advantage of our special offer and subscribe to We Are Sunderland. That's just £1 for 6 months. Thanks for joining us on this. We do these videos a few times a week, so if you haven't seen us already, then do subscribe and you can keep afloat with what we do on here. Joe, Friday we were just chatting before we started on here, and in summary, it was very positive. And it was close, or as close as we've seen to Sunderland of last season.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think I put a tweet out at half time, sort of saying that was a bit different, wasn't it, to what we've seen basically for 2024. So the drop off has been so well documented, and it's been so vast, sort of since Tony Mowbray's exit. Michael Bale didn't work out. Mike Dodds had a tough start. That was back to the sort of what we have been used to with Sunderland, certainly last season, and at the start of this season, you think the Southampton game possibly, but yeah, the first 10 minutes aside, I'll say that it was a big cagey opening, but once they got that first goal from the penalty, you could just feel the weight of relief. It really was as though the weight of the world had just gone off the shoulders when they went 1-0 up. International break obviously came at a really good time for a reset. As soon as that first goal went in, they started. You just see the confidence in them. They were moving around quicker. They were showing for the ball. They all wanted it. They were, not afraid to take on sort of a risky pass, try and progress through the thirds rather than a safe pass left to right, side to side. It was just so much better. There was a bit of pace to it. They were fluid. They created chances. They created so many chances. I mean, they won 2-0, and Mike Dodds said this. There was a little bit of there was a little bit of tension around the penalty. It was one of them that you'd deem soft. Certainly viewing it live, you were thinking that it was a soft one. There is a touch on the back, but it is a soft one. Sometimes you need them things to go for you. But aside from that, they created so many chances. 2-0 flat as Cardiff, to be honest. Certainly in the final 10 or 15 minutes, there was a couple of 1v1s where you could have put a real bit of gloss on the scoreline. So, yeah, it was just such a positive day, and that's been so uncommon. They broke the winless streak. Finally, they won it away from home for the first time in 2024, first time since Boxing Day. Clean sheet again, like I say, back-to-back clean sheets for only the third time this season, first time since September, October. So many positives, Jobe on the score sheet, Al-Shish on the score sheet. Just, yeah, a lot of positives to take from it. And the hope is they've got to continue it now. That was the key message from Mike Dodds afterwards. As good as this was, it's no good if then you follow that against Blackburn on Monday, which we'll come to, and throw in a bit of a dead rubber again. So, but yeah, really important for them just to stop what has been a horrible 2 or 3 months, really. Get a little bit of belief back, send some travelling fans home happy. Yeah, plenty to take from it. Really, really impressive.
And you mentioned it there. Sometimes you do need a moment, don't you? Like that penalty. Sometimes you do need something to build on, but then you've got it. All right, you might get a helping hand, but then you need to take full advantage, and Sunderland have clearly done that. And I think the timing felt important as well, didn't it? On the back of the break, when there was a bit of a reset, it felt like, right, yeah, the top six is gone, but it's important we build some momentum, rediscover the feel-good factor that's clearly gone missing over the last 5, 6, 7 months, and go into what's a decisive summer with a bit of positivity. I'd imagine Mike Dodds afterwards was. I know. I was reading his stuff where he was saying that you've got to stay level, but we're all human. He must have been over the moon because he's had a tough few weeks, hasn't he, since he's come back in?
Yeah, well, that was the line that he said to me. It's been tough for everyone. Myself, the players, because of the results, but he was very steadfast about it. Kind of what he has been in defeat as well. He's been pretty consistent in sort of the messages saying, I believe one win and this can turn the other way. And everything that the players in the group are doing behind the scenes, they have full belief in that. And he sort of just reiterated that message. It would have been very easy for him to come across with and really show that relief in getting a result. But I was quite impressed with how he dealt with himself in the press, because it has been so tough, and he's someone who wants to take a job full time at some point down the line. He said that repeatedly. This is whether this is an audition for that it's not going to help his cause if he's not going to win any games. So that was a big win for him as well, regardless of how big it is just for the club and the players as well. But you mentioned again, like the penalty, and like I say, once those shackles came off at the start, then the sort of 20-minute period after that, they really sort of battered Cardiff, to be honest. I mean, I've got the XG graph up on here. I'll just drag this into the conversation. Look, you can see there in the first 25, 30 minutes, they go to an XG of above 2. That's higher than what they've had pretty much all of 2024. Yeah. And that is in the opening half an hour. Now, and obviously the penalty skews that a little bit, but even beyond that, how many times have we seen Sunderland and it just looks as though they're not creating anything in the final third? They were almost doing it at will here. Now, how much of that was on Cardiff? Cardiff were really poor. I was expecting more from them. But you've still got to go out and do that. And off the back of a run that like they've been on, it was really impressive to create the chances that they were. The only complaint they would have is that they weren't taking them. There was some down the stretch where it jumps up towards in the final 10 minutes. Hamia 1v1, Remain Mundell 1v1, Barr had a chance as well. Like I said earlier in the video, there could have been 3 or 4, and you wouldn't have really said that they wouldn't have deserved that neither. So, like, just so many positives for them. And like you said, to snap that streak and just give them something, because now these 7 games that you've got left of the season, if you can go into it with the same sort of appetite that they had here, you can go into the summer with a little bit of belief. We've spoke about this, me and Matty spoke about this on previous pods, where it's going to be important for a head coach potentially coming in, players coming in. They don't want to see a team that's just totally nosedived and drop off a cliff from sort of February time to the end of the season. They want to see something to buy into going into the summer. So if you can get a couple of results and put that sort of performance in and the effort that we saw yesterday, there's no reason why they can't finish it, certainly in the top half. And then, yeah, there's still plenty to dissect this season and look at what's gone wrong and where it's gone wrong. Recruitment, obviously, huge part of that. But at least that gives you something tangible to go into the summer with and into next season, that there are performances there in this group of players that you can then, if you just add that experience that we often talk about around it, who knows?
You mentioned the many positives there. Jobe Bellingham's performance, undoubtedly one of them. Is best displaying a Sunderland shirt?
For me, it was, yeah, absolutely. And I noted this in the sort of post-match analysis in terms of him and Chris Rigg, because I thought Chris Rigg was excellent again. The highest compliment you can pay Chris Rigg is the fact that he just does not look out of place whatsoever. He's 16-year-old and he's going into these championship games, and he just looks as though he's made to be there. He played out on the right. There was a little bit of debate whether when the team sheet landed, would he be on the right? Would he be in the centre? Would Al-Shish be on the right? How they do it, and ended up being a bit of a 4-2-3-1 with Rigg on the right, and he just breezed through it. It's so much so that the full-back for Cardiff got subbed off at half-time, which kind of tells you what you need to know. I mean, he missed a big opportunity. He's another one, on that XG graph. He'll probably know himself that he had a big chance to score, but he didn't let that bother him neither. As for Jobe, again, I mean, the difference between them two in the international break, Sunderland kept Jobe in-house, didn't let him go out to England, and give him the majority of the fortnight off. Chris Rigg went out and captained England under-17s, got them to the European Championships. Both of them came back refreshed and energised in different ways. Jobe just looked a completely different player. And he almost, did he have a point to prove? Possibly to himself. Maybe, he came out and apologised after that Southampton game, didn't he? I think we debated whether he should or shouldn't have done that. But he came out and he was just, he's made that position his for these final 7 games, no doubt about it. He's Sunderland's striker now down this stretch, because it was a real striker's performance. It was a proper shift. 18-year-old again. And it was his defensive work from the front as well, particularly in the second half. He was chasing back, making tackles on the halfway line. The crowd was serenading his name at the end, which is, again, sort of speaks volumes as to where he's been at, because he has been open to criticism in recent weeks. He took his goal really well, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, obviously, watching it back. The run is excellent. You would probably argue that one of the other 3 strikers don't score that goal because they don't necessarily make that run, because they're not on the same wavelength as some of the other teammates. Jobe makes a really good run to get to the back post, and it's a good cross from Al-Shish as well, and he finishes it well. And even from that, I spoke about the confidence earlier. You could see it in him. It was a ball that went through the thirds from Ekwa, and he was sort of 20, 25 yards out, and where weeks gone by, he sort of recycled that out wide and then, maybe drop back in. He turned and his first thought was to have a shot at goal. All right, it was comfortably saved, but again, just confidence with a goal. And that continued all the second half as well. He was excellent. It was really, really good performance from him. I said to Matty in the preview show for that game, he's 18-year-old. He's Sunderland's second top goal scorer, 7 goals this season. as much as there is improvement to be there, you know, and he has gone through peaks and troughs in terms of his form, he's the last of Sunderland's worries, and he's probably the one player from last summer's recruitment where you think, yeah, he's the one where they've probably got right. Sheesh, maybe after him, but yeah, really, really good performance and sort of a potential for what we could see from Jobe over the next sort of couple of seasons with Sunderland, no doubt about it. Really good.
And when you mentioned there that he's made that position his own for the rest of the season, which I don't dispute. But what about next season? If you're a head coach and you come in and you're preparing for next season, what is Jobe? Where will Sunderland get the best out of him? Because he is going to play. He is going to be a central player next year, isn't he? Whoever comes in is going to be playing him. But where do you play him? Clearly, a centre forward is going to be a priority. It has to be a priority. But is he a striker?
It's an interesting one, and it's one that Jobe sort of asked himself post-match. You know, I think the quote was paraphrasing. I don't really know where my best position is at the moment, but that's exciting, isn't it?
No, yeah.
And what an attitude to have from him. What an attitude for him to have, to think, oh well, I don't really know where my best position is, but I can trial and error where it is, and it's up to the coaches then to play me where they think is best. And because it could go the other way, couldn't it? It could be you could be sort of full of anxiety, thinking where do I need to be playing, where do I need to be performing. He's looking at it completely opposite. And for me, you know, that striking role seems to suit that, or the 10 seems to suit him a little bit more for me than playing deeper, probably the striker role. But next season's an interesting one because you still need that experience in there. You wouldn't want to be going into the season just with Jobe Bellingham as your striker.
No.
Like, you absolutely. But if you then think, if you could get an experienced head in, how many times have we spoke about Keith Moore on this podcast, you know, in January, for example, argument's sake, if you got someone like him in, that experience alongside Jobe, what he could learn from a player like that who's been there, seen it, done it, you know, could stand him in great stead if that is the position where he's going to be playing down the line. You know, Mike Dodds referenced it post-match. He said, I've had a conversation with Jobe about where I think his best position is. Didn't reveal it. We're going to keep that in-house, something to work on over the summer. But certainly on that performance, because it was a really, really good performance in what has been a tough moment for them. He came out and he really grabbed by the scruff of the neck, and you know, it was excellent. And like I say, he's the one who starts up front for me for the rest of the season. He's got to be.
Yeah, I know Dodds. You say that Dodds didn't reveal it, but what do you think Dodds thinks is Bellingham's best position? Because if as looks likely in the summer, Dodds will, you know, I wholly expect Dodds to still be part of the coaching team next season, whoever comes in. And despite the fact Speakman admitted last week that, you know, the new head coach will be able to bring his own stuff with him. When Dodds sits down and kind of does a bit of a handover and goes through the squad and passes on his recommendations, where do you think he'll say to the new head coach that you'll get the best out of Jobe?
I think it will be as the 9.
It's the 9.
I do, yeah. Yesterday was a very strong case. He played in there.
He played in there in his last stint in charge, didn't he? Prominently.
Yeah, I think that was the West Brom game, and he gave a good account of himself there. And the times that he has filled in there, he's probably been better than what the recruitment was in the summer for this actual striking role. You know, Hamia looks as though he's going to need a lot of time to settle. Rusin, there was debate about him. Is he a wide forward now over the course of the last 3 months? Obviously, they sent Mayenda out on loan. Burstow just hasn't cut it. He's the one that stood out in that position. And, you know, his goal return speaks for that as well. You know, like I say, he's the second highest goal scorer. So, and that was another thing that Jobe had said in the interview as well. You know, he's targeting 10 goals this season. Again, great attitude to have. And there's nobody else that's really close to hitting that. So I do think from in-house in the building, there'll be, I think going forward, they'll see him as a striker. But I go back to the case in point I said before, it'll be imperative to get some experience in alongside him. I mean, if you think if there was a Ross Stewart there now, imagine what you could learn off Ross Stewart if he was still there now. The way that he played it, he was sort of the complete package. Jobe kind of has the attributes where he could maybe go on and be like that. So that imperative to get the recruitment right to support him. But I do think that number 9 role is, or the false 9 role, however you want to call it these days, I think that will be his role going forward into next season.
And I agree with Dodds afterwards when he talked about kind of the maybe the unfair weight of expectation because of his surname. And you do have to keep reminding yourself that he is the age he is, because it's remarkable that he's played so much football. He's played in so many different positions. And even there, when you talk about how he talks afterwards, the maturity is just staggering, isn't it?
Absolutely. But I mean, the front line yesterday, the front 4, You had Chris Rigg 16, Jobe 18, Bar 20, Alshish 21. You know, we spoke about that at length all season, and certainly in recent weeks when they'd fielded the younger squads. But that as a front four, it has no right really to be winning championship games and dominating like in attack like what they did yesterday. So it's really pleasing to see that they could do that, and that was in them. And players, it just fit a little bit more. Like Alshish is the 10, Jobe is the 9, Rigg did fine off the right. Bar obviously on that left one when Clark's fit, when he comes back for the final few games, obviously we expect him to move on in the summer. But Roberts is in and around there again as well. All of a sudden getting bodies back, and that was another key thing for me yesterday as well. The bench, just I know that Roberts, at least he didn't come on. Dak only got a couple of minutes. Dak another one. He might move on. He probably will move on in the summer. Hasn't really fulfilled what he could have done, but just having those players back in the squad. Whereas the last home game, you were looking at 3 academy players plus Chris Rigg on the bench. It just felt a little bit more comfortable and looked a little bit better for them to have options on the bench, which again is something that Dodds has said. And like I say, if Clark comes back in for the run in as well, suddenly if Jobe is going to be that 10, looks a little bit more threatening in the final third than what we've seen for the majority of 2024.
And I think that sometimes you maybe get bogged down in what's going on at Sunderland, because let's look at Alshish. If at any other club someone comes in at 21 and has the season that he's had, you think, we've got a real player there. A year or so down the line, we might have a real player there. But because it's become such a norm for Sunderland to have kids at 18, 19 to go in, you almost kind of do fall into the trap of expecting maybe more quickly from them. But Alshish has had a decent first season, all things taken into account. He's had a good few weeks. And is he another who you look at and think he's probably going to be a permanent fixture between now and the end of the season?
I think that'll certainly be the hope. I mean, the potential is there. I did a piece in him on the site at We Are Sunderland, sort of where you look back at his backstory, is a sort of under 17 breaking into the French side. I think he was second in the Golden Ball for the World Cup under 17s, and that was only a few years ago. So the potential is there. You have top clubs. I think Arsenal are a club who were after him. You don't lose that, and coming out of PSG's academy, you don't have something about you if those teams are going to be interested in you either. So it's been difficult. I think he's been one that's able to adjust just in terms of moving to a different country, moving to a different region, and acclimatizing to that, the way the environment of the Championship. He's the one who I think we'll see a lot more of next season. Another one who you're probably thinking, where's his best position been? He's been shipped around across that front three, and I think he's even been as the striker at some points. He looks a lot better as the 10. He looks a lot more comfortable there. I thought that against Queen's Park Rangers. He had a couple of, if something was going to happen, Sunderland was so poor that day, but if something was going to happen, it would have been through him. Likewise, yesterday, he scored and assisted. That's exactly what you're going to be needing from him. We're going to need more of an output from players like Alshish, more from Jobe, more from Bar next season, more from Roberts. Obviously this season's been a difficult one for him with injuries, because if Clark's going to go, you're losing 19 goals there as it stands. People are going to have to step up, plus the recruitment that comes in. But I take your point, and a lot of people do. I think we fall into the trap of it as well. You look at Dan Neil and Pierre, who have been very good examples of this. They're only 22 years old, and they all of a sudden they're the senior figures in that squad. Yeah. They're the seasoned pros. I thought Echo was another one worth a mention on Friday. He was really good, considering what Dodds had said. Had to have a sit down conversation with him sometimes and just remind him that he's got potential, but it's only potential at the minute. And that harbours back to what Tony Mowbray said about you sometimes had to give him a bit of a slap, didn't you, before the game? But he was much better in there. Neil, excellent. And that's what I mean. Like, these players are all of a sudden, when they have good games, you can see that in them, but they're only 22 and younger. So it's gonna be in and out of form, isn't it? It's going to be peaks and troughs. That is why what we always end up going back to with the recruitment, you have to sort of season it out. Me and Matty spoke about it. Lyndon Gooch has come out and said the same. Alex Neil said the same. Michael Beale said the same. Dodds has said the same. Mowbray said the same. All these people who've been in the club, either playing or coaching, are saying the same.
Mowbray used to talk repeatedly, didn't he, about how it's not necessarily on the pitch, but it's in the dressing room, and it's just a different voice instead of mine, instead of the manager's voice. Someone they can maybe relate to more as a teammate.
And that's what I mean about the players coming back in, even just on the bench, having Roberts back in, having Evans back. I mean, Evans wasn't in the squad, but he was the 19th man. He made the journey.
Yeah.
I think he's one who we might see on Monday against Blackburn. He's close. And just having them options in and around, and players like an Evans and a Dak, for example, they're obviously playing for the future as well. They are out contract in the summer. So it's an important run-in for them to see what happens. But just having them around, I'll be interested to see when they do come back in, like say, Elise back on the bench as well, another option at left back. Although I do think Callum Styles did quite well. It was probably his best game since his loan move, because Cardiff's threat is down that right-hand side. I think NG, the right back, he's their top goalers and assists with 10. So, and he kept them very quiet to the point that they switched their attack down the left. So to go back to the game, like I say, there was so many positives with it. It's about now going and reacting it on Monday and getting that consistency. There's been, Dodds has said it a few times, hasn't he? Outside of the QPR game, I felt as though we've gone toe-to-toe with teams, or there's been pockets in games that I've liked. For the large part of that game on Friday, Sunderland were good, which was pleasing to see. It was a consistent performance. Now they need to back it up in games. Yeah,
well, that's exactly what I was going to say. Dodds was right, wasn't he? You've got to build on that, because if not, you get to Monday night and Friday's win is forgotten about, and it's more drop points against a team that are still winless under John Eustace, that are still they're solid and they're organised. I watched them previously. I watched them a few weeks ago play at Middlesbrough, and they've got a lot of draws. I think it was 7 out of 10 at one point. Obviously, they lost to home to Ipswich on Friday night. But on paper, it has the look of a game that's an opportunity for Sunderland on the back of that Cardiff win.
Yeah, and I mean, if you flip it and if it didn't go the way that Sunderland wanted to do on Friday, all of a sudden the pressure and the sort of apathy mixed in together would have just continued. All of a sudden, that result's just, it's eased any sort of lingering fears that they might have been dragged into a relegation battle. Although I think even if they'd have lost, they'd have still been 9 points above it. That doesn't seem to be budging. So I think they'd have probably been all right. But that win just totally eradicates that. And you can go into these games and, like we said at the top of the show, there, just try and make a point of it and try and just take these games almost as a bit of a mini season to go into next season and take something tangible in with a bit of positivity. Like you say, if you can get a result on Monday, no reason that you can't. I think they were quite unlucky against Ipswich by all accounts, but that is a game where you're thinking we can back this up and get 2 wins here. Then you go into another game against Bristol City next weekend where you can probably think the same. I know they went and got a great result against Leicester, but this always struck me as a period coming back out that international break that was going to be key. You had 3 games against teams in and around you where you can put the run to bed, get a little bit of momentum going, and then go into West Brom and Leeds games. I don't want to say a free hit, but you can go and show what you're about. You can express yourselves in them games, because there's pressure on those teams, for different reasons. The pressure will be off for Sunderland by that point. So it's a case of backing that up with a performance. It'll be interesting to see how much rotation there is, because of how well they played. It would be easy to start the same side, but given the close proximity of the games and the nature of the championship, that'll be one to monitor. But again, with players coming back in, I'd expect Evans in the squad. Clark's not far away. Monday, possibly too soon, but maybe next weekend you might be getting him back into the fold. Then all of a sudden, just feels a little bit upbeat again, which is extraordinary, really, considering the conversations that we've had on this podcast over the course of the last 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks.
Which has to be the priority now, doesn't it? Between now and the summer, to go into the summer, to be sat at the end of the season talking like this, talking about the positives and the performances of individuals, and kind of discussing who fits where, and looking back at wins and the excitement that how things might come together next year. What you want is that, don't you? Rather than a new head coach coming in and having to pick up the pieces of a messy final few weeks of the season, with Sunderland finishing 14th, 15th.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I said it earlier, didn't I? Finishing top half and having a bit of a run just feels a bit more encouraging to players and a head coach coming in. And myself and Mike spoke about it again, and getting that head coach in early is going to be key. They'll be out there. I think the meeting with candidates already came out, didn't it, in the minutes. You'd like to think that that's going to be finalised as near to the end of the season as possible, like heading into the summer, so they've got a full summer, a full pre-season camp to get integrated with moving, if they've got to move up here or whatever, or moved countries, if for Will Still, for example, and just get their ideas in place immediately, so that you can get it, so that what happened basically when relieving Tony Mowbray's duties doesn't happen again. They've admittedly got that wrong with Bale. I think Bale was speaking, wasn't he, on Friday about it, and reiterated the sort of experience thing, but they can't let that happen again. They can't let it happen again. And if you finish the season, it's not going to eradicate what's happened these last 3 or 4 months. but at least it kind of can draw a line under it and it's not hanging over, like you say, and going into next season, because you see it in different circumstances of a playoff. If you lose a playoff final, that can hang over. If you can finish the season a bit more positively, all of a sudden they can take that. These 3 months can take a little bit of a backseat. Like I say, I'm not excusing them, I'm not saying that it can be forgotten about, because there's mistakes in there that are not acceptable. And for Sunderland to go on a 7-game winless run, not acceptable at this level. This is where you've got to get it right. This is where you've got to put the pieces in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. And we've said it all along how big the summer is, for the hierarchy in terms of what they want to do for the club. This is the period, this next sort of 3 or 4 months, where you're going to find out, are Sunderland serious about trying to get out of this division? Because there is potential in that group, as much as they've been on that run. Yesterday shows that when they are clicking, when it is on form, they're a good side. There are some good players in there. That has been a drum that's been beaten quite consistently. Dodds has said that when you're losing, fans don't really want to hear that. But when you see it in practice, when you see it in action, there are some talented players here. And it's not far away. It's not a million miles away. It's probably further away than what it should have been after last season. But there is still, you can still bring that back with a smart bit of recruitment in the summer, where you can then go and have a really good season next season.
I think that is bulk of the frustration of the season, really, in that, like, clearly Sunderland are flawed. That they've lacked a natural centre forward all season, but still on the days we know and we've seen what they're capable of, and we know what individual players are capable of. And I look at like Norwich, Preston, Coventry. I think Sunderland are just as good as those teams, even with the failure to bring in a natural centre forward, or the failure to bring in a goal scoring centre forward in the summer and in January. I still think Sunderland should have been right there in the mix this season, which I think is kind of part of the frustration at how the season's petered out. Just finally, before Rob, I touched it earlier, in relating to the supporters collective notes that came out last week that I know we've discussed, but Speakman did say that a new head coach will be able to bring in the backroom staff, which kind of seems like a staggering thing to even be discussing, really. That's just part and parcel of football, isn't it? You would think a head coach wants kind of his trusted lieutenants, or a trusted lieutenant with them. But you still fully expect Mike Dodds to be a part of the coaching team next season?
You would think so, yeah. I think there's been a lot of change over the course of the last 6-7 months, and there's clearly a strong relationship there between Dodds and this squad of players and the rest of the coaching staff that's in there. To remove them to bring in a new head coach and staff, you're jeopardising that a little bit. So I don't think that they will. I think that the team said, Speakman sort of said that continuity is what aids positive performance, and I agree to an extent with that. Likewise, I agree that whoever comes in should be allowed to bring somebody in. I know that there was talk about Michael Beale not being allowed to bring somebody in. Dodds kind of clarified that a little bit this last week.
Yeah, that was interesting.
In saying, the initial suggestion was to come in and then look to bring someone in after a few weeks that you're getting in. But obviously the way that it went, it just never got to the point where he could. I think from the off, it'll help whoever comes in just to bring a person in, and then obviously integrate with Dodds and Michael Proctor and the rest of the staff at the academy. It's like I say, it seems like they've got a good relationship there. So there's been that much sort of frustration and that many different ideas that have gone on over the course of the last 6 months, and will again when a new head coach comes in. Just having that familiar face there will probably be important. But I suppose a lot of that's on Mike Dodds as well. Will he take the end of this run? If they end up turning the corner and go on a decent run to finish the season now, will he see that as his time to then look and think, oh, this is my chance to go and look for a job myself in the top seat, or am I happy here doing another year as sort of a first team coach and just developing that way? That'll be an interesting one to see, and I think a lot might depend on how these sort of final 7 games go.
Well, thanks, Joe. Thanks to our partners, the Fans Museum and Prospect Opticians, and thank you to you for watching or listening. Do subscribe if you haven't already. As I said at the top, just press subscribe, and if you're listening on podcast, then rate and review. And if you haven't already, then do subscribe to We Are Sunderland as well. That's just £1 for 6 months for high quality content, analysis, interviews from Joe and Matty Hewitt, and there'll be plenty on the site on Monday as Sunderland host Blackburn at the Stadium of Light, and then reaction throughout the week. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Let's hope our next video looking back on the Blackburn game is as upbeat as this one has been today. Thanks again.